We've known for quite a while that the next destination for the Nameless is the eternal land Amphoreus, a land once inhabited by titans gifted with the powers of the gods and whose residents experience immense prosperity. Yet despite its supposedly prosperous history, according to Black Swan, many in the universe aren't even aware of its existence, including Akavili. Isn't it odd that such an amazing sounding place has seemingly been overlooked even by the eon of exploration themselves? On top of that, the world is also seemingly coveted by more than one path, and even Herta, who never leaves her cave, is now getting in on the action. The more we learn about this place, the more things just don't seem to add up. There are a myriad of different questions and contradictions that surface the deeper we look into Amphoreus, and in this video, I want to discuss all of them and propose a few theories related to this mysterious world. Before we talk about Amphoreus though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. As with all my other videos, this one will have some spoilers mostly related to the unknowable domain simulated universe. It's mostly towards the end, so if you want to avoid that, just close your ears or something when you hear me say Herta. Anyway, we first learn of Amphoreus from the professional hitchhiker Black Swan at the end of the 2.3 main story. Given she was the one to bring up this place, let's first take stock of everything she mentions about it. While sneaking around the Express uninvited, Black Swan overhears the Nameless discuss their predicament of the Express running out of fuel, as well as which destination to visit next. To remedy their problem, she suggests a location that can not only provide the fuel the Express needs, but is also a location that even Akavili has never visited. She explains that the world itself is not known to many across the universe and is seemingly hidden away from outside observers. The only way it can be revealed is through the light from the mirror of the Garden of Recollection, and as it happens, she seems to be able to guide the Nameless there. While it sounds like the ideal stop, she mentions that the world is fettered by 3 different paths, with its destiny hanging in the balance. After a lot of rather cryptic talk, she finally reveals the name of this place, being the Eternal Land Amphoreus. Now, based on everything Black Swan and the trailer has shown us, let me lay out my first suspicion or theory. I don't think that Amphoreus is a real place, at least not in the traditional sense. Let me explain. With the way that it's spoken about, I have this suspicion that Amphoreus isn't a physical location like a planet, but instead it's likely a mimetic existence or perhaps even a world contained within a memory bubble. Nowhere in her little exposition did Black Swan ever mention a planet, and she only used the word location and world. If Amphoreus really is just a memory, it might explain why the light of the Garden of Recollection is needed to access it. This might also explain why very few know of its existence, as mimetic entities are often incorporeal and difficult to notice. Black Swan herself, who is a mimetic entity, was able to move unrestricted throughout Penacony, with few able to stop her or even notice her. This might also be why Akavili has never actually been there, since it's not a physical location. But who has ever heard of a whole damn planet being turned into a memory or a meme, right? All we've seen thus far are light cones and short moments captured by the memory bubbles, but nothing on the scale of an entire planet. Well, as it happens, there is an actual example of this. In the Written in Water Curio, the Bokulet Nebula was able to avoid destruction from the hands of Lord Ravager Selenova by going through a mimetic rebirth. With the help of Memo Keepers, the entire world's memories along with its people were converted into Memoria. So if they have done this before, it wouldn't be too surprising if Amphoreus is something similar. Even the name of this location itself hints at this. Amphoreus is likely derived from the word amphora, which refers to containers commonly found in ancient Mediterranean. These containers often depict history or epics displayed on their surface as a form of decoration. So perhaps this is the inspiration for this particular world. On top of that, in the trailer for Amphoreus, the last thing we see is an infinity symbol, which could be a hint that perhaps those that inhabit this location have been living in a looping memory. Amphoreus, as it exists today, could just be a snippet of something, a brief cutout of a past memory existing on a continuous loop, much like the pictures we see on Amphoreus. Plus, if Amphoreus really is a giant mimetic existence and is related to the Memo Keepers in some way, then it makes perfect sense why the next Trailblaze path is that of remembrance. This might be why all throughout Penacony, the Trailblazer was hinted to be sensitive to Memoria. Perhaps it's foreshadowing for their time on this world. So there seems to be quite a few hints that this location may not be a physical place, but it's likely a world that has been trapped or converted into a memory, perhaps to preserve it or prevent its destruction. Now, that being said, I'm only referring to it as a memetic existence because that's the closest approximation we have. There could be some other explanation at play here, like the planet being miniaturized and kept in a bottle, or maybe transported to another dimension or something. In any case, all this talk about the remembrance leads us to the next part of this conversation. Which three paths are the ones that Black Swan alluded to in her exposition? Obviously, remembrance is likely to play a big role here given Black Swan's presence and the next Trailblaze path being remembrance, but what I'm more interested in is why is the Garden of Recollection or Remembrance really here? I mean, why protect this planet specifically? I have an idea of what it might be, but we have to go on a bit of a tangent. In my trailer analysis video, I suspected that by the end of the 3.0 story, the people of Amphoreus will do something no human has done before, which is to break away from their predefined fate. If this happens, it perhaps marks the first time that humanity was able to achieve this, and being the busybody that they are, fully might want to be present to witness it. Other than that, it could just be a very simple explanation. Maybe the Memo Keepers just want to preserve memories much like what they did with the Bocalet Nebula, or perhaps Amphoreus has something they want. I'm also curious about what this might mean for March given Remembrance's central role here, but that's for another video. Now the second path or aeon that might be involved here could be Nihility, and I'm mostly saying this due to the number of hints we get in the trailer. Firstly, the trailer mentions the sun of this world becoming silent as the gods wage war, which is eerily similar to Acheron's own story. Her people were fighting the Kami, which literally means gods, and as they did this, the shadow of Ix quietly engulfed the sun, almost silencing it. Then you have quite a few mentions of the word gloom, which in this context could be associated with nihility or despair. For example, you have the Black Tide, where its gloom was said to be darker than death itself, and that the Outlanders would visit under the Veil of Gloom. The hand that holds up the eclipse in the trailer also appears quite similar to the one we see Acheron and Tiernan witness in the distance. Lastly, if the shadow of Ix really is engulfing this world, then I would understand the urgency of what Black Swan claimed when she mentioned that the world's destiny hung in the balance. Because with every example we have seen so far, once you go nihility, you don't go back. I mean, Aha's nonsense can always be prevented or stopped. Lazaron swarms can always be fought back, and even destruction can be avoided. Like the example I mentioned earlier, the Memo Keepers have prevented the destruction of a world by turning it into a memetic form. But with nihility, you can't really get away from it. Once you are in its shadow, there is no escape. So I would wager, given all these hints, that the second path would be nihility. As for the third path or aeon, to be honest with you, I don't really know, and that's not because I don't have any ideas. In fact, it's the opposite. The golden blood we see flowing from the severed arm kinda reminds me of Nanook, but the hand itself holding up the eclipse looks like the one we see in Tiernan's cutscene, which hints its nihility. The trailer mentioned that there are titans whose role it is to guide Calamity's Gate, which kinda then reminds me of finality. But in the trailer, you also have quite a few symbols of eyes, which then reminded me of Enna, but since we know they were absorbed, that seems unlikely. In the simulated universe, it was hinted that after Enna was absorbed, Ho-Oh of the Equilibrium partially took over, so maybe it's Ho-Oh. But then, the prophecy spoken in the trailer also mentions a three-faced messenger bearing the tidings of 100 worlds, which then makes me think of Shipe, the Harmony, who, as you know, absorbed Enna. Even one of the Chrysos heirs, Anazagoras the Foolish, could be a hint of Aha's involvement. And to top it all off, who's to say that the reason people don't know about this place isn't because of Mythos and their wiki editing antics? So suffice to say, there's a lot of hints of the presence of many other paths and eons that makes it difficult to really pin down which is more likely. It could be destruction, finality, harmony, equilibrium, order, and who knows which other eon is invited. So for now, I'll leave you to decide who the third one might be. I'm personally hoping it's finality. By this point, we've discussed the idea that Amphoreus might not be a physical place and that the three paths are likely remembrance, nihility, and whichever third choice you think is right. But there is one last thing to talk about. What has any of this got to do with Herta? Why is it that of all times, this exact moment is when Herta has chosen to make an appearance? She hardly ever comes out of her hidey hole, so what's so important about Amphoreus? Well, I have two guesses, and the first is a simpler explanation and is that she really just wants to gather data. The simulated universe is meant to develop a deeper understanding of the aeons and figure out their origins. So given Amphoreus is in the line of sight of three paths and likely their aeons, this might be a golden opportunity for her to see how these aeons might actually interact with one another. I mean, seeing an aeon in the flesh is already a rare occurrence, so having the chance to potentially see three of them duke it out is likely an unmissable event. The second reason why I think Herta is involved is a bit more difficult to explain. It's something to do with what she learned from Polka Kakamon in the Unknowable Domain simulated universe story. So, spoiler time. Now, I've talked about this in far more detail on another video, and I really suggest you check that one out, but the gist of it is that there are two sides to the conflict currently gripping the cosmos, a conflict Herta refers to as the True War. In the Unknowable Domain, Polka Kakamon explains that her actions are as a result of Nusa's calculations. The Aeon of Erudition has figured out the perfect model for the universe. Any new discoveries or knowledge that expands beyond this model causes the universe to move away from it and become chaotic as well as move towards finality. Basically, the model Nus developed requires some level of curation to figure out what humanity can and cannot scientifically discover. That's largely why Kakamon has been going around killing geniuses. By the end of that whole debacle, Herta still believes that humanity can and should move beyond fate, while Kakamon believes the opposite. As it turns out, this fight doesn't seem to only be on the level of geniuses, but in fact might involve the aeons as well. There are aeons who, much like Nus, prefer a more predictable and fixed universe where fate is predetermined, while on the other side are aeons who value freedom. This is the war Herta mentions and why I think she is interested in Amphoreus. Amphoreus will likely be the first place we see where fate is actually tested. Is it indeed immutable, or can humanity break away from it? This might be why so many paths and aeons might be interested in this place. It's literally the backdrop of a massive cosmic war that has been raging on since the first path was born. If the people of Amphoreus manage to change their fate, it means that not only is Nusa's calculations not perfect, but many of the aeons who value order will start to sweat. Now, if what we've discussed here turns out to be true, the story will likely revolve around the Trailblazer helping Amphoreus break away from this three-way Mexican standoff. The trailer mentions that the Nameless King is on a mission of deliverance and will be assisted by many heroes, and in the last line of the trailer, there's mentions of them inscribing the opening stroke in the poem of creation. It's very likely that the fate of this world may again rest in the hands of the Trailblazer, given their ability to alter fate. The image of their remembrance form has them holding a quill or a pen or something, almost as though they are literally writing the opening stroke of this story. As we've discussed many times before on this channel, the Trailblazer could really just be the catalyst that enables individuals around them to break away from their fate, and perhaps this is exactly what will happen. In fact, I'm sure Black Swan is betting on this very thing happening. Now let me remind you, everything I've discussed here is ultimately just assumptions and guesses. I don't know if these things will turn out in the way that I say them, and I might very well be misinterpreting some of these so-called hints. I mean, that whole golden blood arm thing could actually be a reference to Iker, which in Greek mythology is the literal blood of the gods. Perhaps in that scene, the arm with the flowing blood symbolizes the transfer of power from the gods to the titans and now to the heirs, given the scene shows the blood flowing downwards and right after that it cuts to Aglaia. So just take what I share here with a grain of salt. We don't truly know what will happen until the story itself unfolds. If this ended up becoming true, however, 3.0 might be the turning point in Honkai Star Rail's story. We have so far been involved with isolated events around the universe, but I have a feeling that Amphoreus is going to expose the Trailblazer to the bigger story taking part in the game. But for now, I'll eagerly wait for the release of 3.0 and end the video here. Let me know what you think about these ideas. Are the hints indicators of what likely might happen, or do you have your own ideas? Share them in the comments. If you enjoyed watching the video, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.